baby's cries pierced through the silence of the mansion at 3 a.m. Dorcas jolted awake on the cold marble floor of the nursery, her back aching from another night without a proper bed. Little Ella was burning with fever, and Dorcas knew she had to act fast. What she didn't know was that Desmond Lancaster, Toronto's most ruthless billionaire, was standing in the doorway, watching everything unfold. Hello friends, thank you so much for stopping by. Please support me by subscribing to my channel, like and share this video to your family and friends. I truly appreciate your kind heart. So, let's begin. Dorcas had been working as a maid in the Lancaster mansion for 3 months. Every night she slept on the floor beside baby Ella's crib, because the child would only stop crying when she was near. Mrs. Alexa Lancaster, Desmond's wife, had made it clear that Dorcas was not allowed to use any of the guest rooms. "You're just the help," Alexa had said with cold eyes. "Know your place." But tonight was different. Ella's fever was rising, and Dorcas could feel panic growing in her chest. The baby's tiny hands were so hot, and her breathing was shallow. Dorcas had tried calling Alexa, but there was no answer. Mr. Lancaster was supposed to be away on business in Vancouver. "Come on, sweet baby," Dorcas whispered, gently rocking Ella in her arms. "Please be okay." She had no money for a doctor. Her wages barely covered sending money back home to Jamaica to help her sick mother. But this baby needed help now. Dorcas made a decision that would change everything. She wrapped Ella in a blanket and prepared to take her to the hospital herself, using the emergency money she had saved for her mother's medicine. As she stood up from the floor, cradling the baby, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Her heart stopped. Someone was coming. The footsteps were heavy, measured, and familiar. Dorcas's hands shook as she realized it could only be one person. But Mr. Lancaster wasn't supposed to be back from Vancouver until next week. "Please don't let him be angry," she whispered to herself, clutching Ella closer to her chest. The baby whimpered softly, her little face flushed red with fever. Dorcas had heard stories about Desmond Lancaster from the other staff. They said he was cold, ruthless, and had no patience for mistakes. Miriam, the head housekeeper, had warned her to stay invisible when he was around. "Mr. Lancaster doesn't like disruptions," she had said. "Do your work quietly and keep out of his way." Now here she was, about to face him in the middle of the night, holding his sick child, while planning to take her out of the house without permission. What would he think? What would he do? The footsteps stopped right outside the nursery door. Dorcas held her breath, her heart pounding so loud she was sure he could hear it. Ella stirred in her arms, making soft crying sounds that seemed to echo in the silent hallway. Then the door opened. Desmond Lancaster had cut his business trip short. Something felt wrong at home, and he always trusted his instincts. That's how he had built his billion-dollar empire in Toronto's real estate market. The meeting in Vancouver could wait. There had been something in Miriam's voice during their last phone call that troubled him. As he quietly entered his mansion using his private entrance, he heard soft voices coming from the nursery. His first thought was that something had happened to Ella. His second thought was wondering why anyone would be in his daughter's room at this hour. What he saw stopped him in his tracks. There was Dorcas, the young woman Alexa had hired, sleeping on the hard floor beside Ella's crib. Her thin blanket barely covered her, and she was shivering in the cold room. But what shocked him more was seeing her now, at 3 a.m., holding his burning daughter with such tender care. "Sir," Dorcas gasped when she saw him in the doorway. I was just—" "The baby is sick," Desmond said, stepping into the room. It wasn't a question. He could see Ella's flushed face and hear her labored breathing. "Yes, sir. She has a high fever. I tried calling Mrs. Lancaster, but—" Dorcas's voice trailed off. She didn't want to get anyone in trouble, but she was desperate for help. Desmond's jaw tightened. He pulled out his phone and tried calling Alexa. It went straight to voicemail. He tried again. Same result. On the third attempt, he heard the automated message. The number you have dialed has been turned off. How long has she been like this? He asked, his voice carefully controlled. She started getting warm around dinner time, sir. But it got much worse after midnight. I've been trying to cool her down with damp cloths, but nothing is working. Desmond noticed the small basin of water beside Dorcas's makeshift bed on the floor, along with several washcloths. This young woman had been battling his daughter's fever alone for hours. Why are you sleeping on the floor? He asked quietly. Dorcas looked down, embarrassed. She had hoped he would never find out about this arrangement. Mrs. Lancaster said I should stay close to the baby at night. She said the guest rooms aren't for people like me. Something dark flickered in Desmond's eyes. He had been married to Alexa for 5 years, but he was still learning new things about her cruelty. Get the baby ready. We're going to the hospital now. Sir, I don't have money for... Did I ask about money? Desmond's voice was sharp, but not unkind. Get her ready. I'll bring the car around. As Dorcas gathered Ella's things with shaking hands, Desmond watched her careful, practiced movements. She knew exactly where everything was, exactly what the baby needed. This wasn't someone who occasionally helped with childcare. This was someone who had been doing everything. How long have you been the one caring for Ella at night? He asked. Since I started working here, sir. Mrs. Lancaster said she needed her sleep for her social commitments. Desmond felt anger building in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. And during the day? I take care of her then too, sir. Feed her, bathe her, play with her, take her for walks in the garden. Mrs. Lancaster is very busy with her friends and charity work. What charity work? Desmond wondered. Alexa's idea of charity was buying expensive dresses for fundraising galas, where she spent more money on her outfit than she donated to the cause. Ready, sir, Dorcas said softly, holding Ella, who was wrapped in a warm blanket. Let's go. The drive to Toronto General Hospital was tense but revealing. Desmond drove his Range Rover through the empty streets, while Dorcas sat in the back, holding Ella and whispering soft prayers in patois. Despite his cold reputation in business, Desmond found himself glancing in the rearview mirror, watching how gently this young woman cared for his daughter. Hush now, little one, Dorcas murmured. We're going to get you help. The doctors will make you feel better. You speak to her in Jamaican? Desmond asked, not unkindly. Sometimes, sir. My grandmother always said babies understand love in any language. And when she's fussy, the patois seems to calm her down. What were you saying just now? I was telling her that she's brave and strong, and that everything will be okay. Desmond felt something twist in his chest. When was the last time anyone had spoken to Ella with such tenderness? When was the last time Alexa had even held their daughter? How long has she been like this? He asked again, needing to understand the timeline. She started getting warm around dinner time, sir. But Mrs. Lancaster was getting ready for her evening out, and she said not to bother her unless it was a real emergency. And you didn't think a fever was a real emergency? Dorcas hesitated. She didn't want to get Mrs. Lancaster in trouble, but she also couldn't lie. I did think it was concerning, sir. But Mrs. Lancaster said babies get fevers all the time, and I was probably overreacting because I'm not experienced with children from wealthy families. Desmond's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. What does being wealthy have to do with how sick a baby gets? I don't know, sir. That's just what she said. They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound being Ella's labored breathing and Dorcas's soft humming. You were willing to take her to the hospital yourself, Desmond said suddenly. How were you planning to pay for it? Dorcas looked down at the baby in her arms. I have some emergency money saved, sir. It was supposed to be for my mother's medication back home. but Ella needed help now. Desmond felt like someone had punched him in the gut. This young woman, who was barely being paid enough to survive, was willing to spend her family's medical money on his daughter. Meanwhile, his wife was out partying, unreachable when their child was in crisis. At the hospital, everything moved quickly. Ella was taken to the pediatric unit, where nurses immediately began working to bring down her fever. Dorcas stayed right by the baby's side, holding her hand and continuing to speak to her in soft, reassuring tones. Dr. Jude, the attending physician, examined Ella thoroughly. He was a kind man in his 40s, who had emigrated from Nigeria and understood what it meant to care for children far from your homeland. "She has a severe ear infection that spread to her throat," Dr. Jude explained to Desmond. "The fever is her body's way of fighting it, but it could have been dangerous if left untreated much longer." "How much longer?" Desmond asked. "A few more hours at this temperature, and we might have been looking at febrile seizures or worse. Good thing you brought her in when you did." Desmond looked at Dorcas, who was sitting in a chair beside Ella's hospital bed, gently stroking the baby's forehead. She had potentially saved his daughter's life. "Doctor," Desmond said quietly, "the young woman there, she's the one who noticed how sick Ella was getting. She's the one who wanted to bring her in hours ago." Dr. Jude looked over at Dorcas with respect. "She has good instincts. Many parents don't recognize the signs of a serious infection this early." "She's not the parent," Desmond said. She works for us." "Well," Dr. Jude said, "she cares for this baby like she's her own child. That little girl is very lucky to have someone so attentive watching over her." As they spoke, a nurse approached them. "Excuse me, but the little one keeps reaching for the young woman whenever we try to take her vitals. Would it be okay if she holds her during the procedures? It might keep the baby calmer." Desmond nodded, and he watched as Dorcas carefully lifted Ella, who immediately settled against her chest. The baby's crying stopped, and her breathing became more regular. "She trusts you," the nurse observed with a smile. "That's beautiful to see." It was beautiful, Desmond realized, and it was something he had never seen between Alexa and Ella. While Ella recovered in the hospital over the next 2 days, Desmond started asking questions. He called his head of security, Festus, a sharp man who had worked for the Lancaster family for years. Festus was not just an employee, but a trusted friend who had helped Desmond navigate the treacherous waters of wealth and power in Toronto's elite circles. "I want to know everything about what happens in my house when I'm gone," Desmond ordered when Festus met him at the hospital cafeteria. "Everything about how my daughter is being cared for, and everything about the staff." Festus was thorough and discreet. He had connections throughout Toronto's domestic worker network, and he knew how to ask questions without raising suspicion. Within 2 days, he had a complete report that made Desmond's blood boil. Alexa had been treating Dorcas like a slave, not a paid employee. She made her work 18-hour days, starting at 5 a.m. and finishing after 11 p.m. Dorcas was responsible for all of Ella's care, plus cleaning, laundry, and cooking when the regular staff had time off. She slept on the nursery floor not by choice, but because Alexa had told her it was part of her job to be available to the baby at all times. Worse, Alexa had been pocketing half of Dorcas's already small wages, claiming it was for room and board, even though Dorcas's room was the floor and her board was leftover food. "She's been sending money to her mother in Jamaica who has diabetes," Festus reported, sliding a folder across the table. "The girl has been living on maybe $50 a week after sending the rest home. I found receipts in her room. She's been buying her own soap, toothpaste, everything. Mrs. Lancaster told her those weren't provided for temporary staff." "Temporary staff? She's been here 3 months. It gets worse, sir. Mrs. Lancaster has been telling people that Dorcas is unreliable and not very bright. She's been setting her up to be fired, probably so she wouldn't have to pay her final wages." Desmond thought about Dorcas sleeping on that cold floor, shivering under a thin blanket while his wife slept in luxury upstairs. He thought about how Dorcas had been willing to spend her last emergency money to get Ella medical care. "There's more, sir," Festus continued. "Mrs. Lancaster has been seeing someone else. A man named Marcus. She's been meeting him at hotels around the city. She's been using your credit cards to pay for the rooms." Desmond wasn't surprised about Alexa's affair. Their marriage had been cold for years, built more on social expectations than love, but using their daughter's caregiver as a scapegoat while she gallivanted around Toronto was unforgivable. "And Marcus, what do we know about him?" "Real estate developer, but small time. Married, 2 kids in private school. Word is he's been telling Mrs. Lancaster that he's going to leave his wife for her, but his friends say he has no intention of giving up his family." "So Alexa is being played?" "Appears so, sir. And she's too blinded by whatever attention he's giving her to see it." Desmond closed the folder and looked through the hospital window at Dorcas, who was reading to Ella from a children's book she had bought with her own meager funds. "Festus, I want you to do something else for me. Find out everything you can about Dorcas's background, but I want it done respectfully. I'm not looking for dirt. I want to know who she really is." "Already done, sir," Festus said with a small smile. "She's exactly who she appears to be." The report on Dorcas painted a picture of quiet strength and sacrifice that humbled Desmond. She had grown up in Kingston, Jamaica, the youngest of 4 children. Her father had died when she was 12, leaving her mother to raise the family alone while managing diabetes with little access to proper medical care. Dorcas had been an excellent student, winning awards for both academics and community service. She had dreamed of becoming a teacher, but when her older siblings moved to England and the United States for work, she became her mother's primary caregiver. She had worked several jobs in Jamaica, as a tutor for wealthy families, a shop assistant, and a caregiver for elderly people in her community. Everyone described her the same way: kind, reliable, and devoted to helping others. When her mother's diabetes worsened and the medical bills became overwhelming, Dorcas had made the difficult decision to seek work abroad. She had borrowed money for a plane ticket to Toronto, arriving with nothing but a small suitcase and a work visa, arranged through an agency. The agency had placed her with 3 different families before the Lancasters. The first family had paid her fairly but let her go when their children started school. The second family had tried to cheat her on wages, and she had respectfully quit. The third family had treated her well, but they moved to Calgary and couldn't take her with them. She could have taken several other positions, Festus reported, better paying ones too. But she chose to work for your family because Mrs. Lancaster promised her consistent hours and said she could have Sundays off to attend church and video call her mother. And did she get Sundays off? Not once, sir. Mrs. Lancaster always found reasons why Dorcas needed to work: dinner parties, social events, or just because she wanted to go out and needed someone to watch Ella. Desmond felt sick. This young woman had sacrificed everything for her family and had been repaid with exploitation and abuse. "Sir," Festus said quietly, "there's something else you should know. I spoke with Dr. Jude about Ella's condition. He said that the kind of infection she had doesn't develop overnight. It builds up over days, sometimes weeks. A attentive caregiver would have noticed the early symptoms." Meaning Dorcas probably did notice. She probably tried to tell Mrs. Lancaster several times that something was wrong. Mrs. Lancaster just didn't listen. That evening, as Ella slept peacefully in her hospital bed with IV antibiotics running through her tiny system, Desmond sat with Dorcas in the family lounge. "Can I ask you something?" he said gently. "Of course, sir." "Did you try to tell my wife that Ella was getting sick before that night?" Dorcas looked down at her hands, which were folded in her lap. She had been dreading this question. "Yes, sir. For about 4 days I noticed she wasn't eating as well, and she was more fussy than usual. I mentioned it to Mrs. Lancaster, but she said I was being paranoid and that I needed to stop bothering her with every little thing. What did you do? I kept watching Ella more closely. I took her temperature several times, and I tried to get her to eat and drink more. But when the fever started, I knew it was serious. And my wife still wouldn't listen. She said that people from Jamaica tend to be dramatic about illness because we don't understand how strong Canadian babies are. Desmond closed his eyes. Even now, Alexa's cruelty could still surprise him. Dorcas, I want you to know something. You were right to be concerned. Dr. Okafor said your quick action probably saved Ella from serious complications. You're not dramatic and you're not paranoid. You're exactly the kind of caregiver every child deserves. Tears welled up in Dorcas's eyes. She had been carrying guilt for days, wondering if she should have done something differently, something sooner. Thank you, sir. I love her so much. I couldn't bear the thought of something happening to her. And that's when Desmond realized something that changed everything. This young woman loved his daughter more than his own wife did. When Ella was released from the hospital, Desmond made sure Dorcas came home with them. But first, he had some changes to make. Miriam, he called to his longtime housekeeper, who had been with the family for over a decade and was like a mother figure to all the staff. Yes, Mr. Lancaster? Please prepare the guest suite on the second floor for Dorcas. She'll be staying there from now on. Make sure she has everything she needs, fresh linens, toiletries, whatever makes her comfortable. Miriam's face lit up with a smile. She had always liked the sweet young woman from Jamaica and had been upset about how Mrs. Lancaster treated her, though she had felt powerless to intervene. Of course, sir. It's about time. That child has been through enough. And Miriam, I want you to calculate what Dorcas should have been paid for the past 3 months if she had been receiving proper wages for the hours she's actually worked. Include overtime, night differential, and holiday pay. Then double it. Sir, she's been underpaid and overworked. I want to make it right. When Alexa returned home that evening, perfectly dressed and smelling of expensive perfume, she found her husband waiting in the living room. She had finally gotten her phone messages about the hospital, but had decided to finish her spa day first. Darling, she said with fake brightness, dropping her shopping bags by the door. How was your trip? I heard Ella was a bit under the weather, but I'm sure it was nothing serious. Children get sick all the time. Nothing serious? Desmond's voice was deadly calm. Our daughter had a severe infection. She could have died. Alexa waved her hand dismissively. The doctors always make things sound worse than they are. It's how they justify their fees. I'm sure she just had a little cold. She was in the hospital for 2 days with IV antibiotics. Well, she's fine now, isn't she? That's what matters. Alexa looked around the room. Where is the nanny? I hope she's not expecting to be paid while Ella was in the hospital. She wasn't working. Actually, she was working. Around the clock. While you were... Where were you exactly? I told you, I was at the spa. Then I had dinner with the girls. You know how important it is for me to maintain our social connections. Speaking of social connections, Desmond stood up slowly. How's Marcus Chen? The color drained from Alexa's face. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, Alexa. I know about the affairs. I know about the hotels, and I know about how you've been stealing from Dorcas's wages. That girl has been spreading lies about me. No lies, just facts. Backed up by credit card statements, witness statements, and hospital records showing that you were unreachable while our daughter was in medical crisis. Alexa's mask finally fell away, revealing the cold, selfish woman underneath. So what? She's lucky to have a job at all. Do you know how many people would kill to work in a house like this? Living on the floor isn't working in the house, it's being treated like an animal. She's getting room and board. The floor isn't a room and leftovers aren't board. You're being ridiculous. She's just the help. She's not family. You're right, Desmond said quietly. She's not family. She's better than family. She's someone who actually cares about our daughter. I care about Ella. When? When was the last time you fed her, bathed her, played with her, or even held her for more than a photo opportunity? Alexa opened and closed her mouth, unable to answer. Get out, Desmond said quietly. What? I said get out. Pack your things and leave. Tonight. You can't be serious. I'm your wife. You stopped being my wife the moment you put our daughter's life at risk with your selfishness. My lawyers will be in touch about the divorce. You're throwing away our marriage for a maid? I'm ending our marriage because of who you've chosen to be. The maid, as you call her, just helped me see it clearly. As Alexa screamed and threw things around the house, Dorcas stayed in Ella's room, trying to keep the baby calm. She had heard the shouting but didn't understand what was happening until Miriam came to explain. Mr. Lancaster found out how his wife was treating you, Miriam said gently, sitting beside Dorcas on the comfortable chair that had replaced the spot on the floor where she used to sleep. He's very angry about it. Dorcas felt scared. She had seen what happened when rich people got angry at the help. Usually it meant losing your job and being thrown out with no references. Am I going to be fired? She asked quietly. Miriam smiled and patted her hand. Child, I think your life is about to get much better. Later that evening, after Alexa had been escorted out by security with her suitcases and angry threats, Desmond came to the nursery. Ella was sleeping peacefully in her crib, and Dorcas was sitting in a chair beside her. The first time she hadn't slept on the floor in months. The room felt different now. Warmer somehow. Peaceful. Dorcas, Desmond said softly, we need to talk. She stood up nervously, smoothing down her simple dress. Yes, sir? First, I want to apologize. What my wife did to you was unacceptable. No one should be treated the way you were treated in this house. Dorcas looked down. It's okay, sir. I just wanted to take care of the baby. It's not okay, Desmond said firmly. And second, I want to offer you a new position. Not as a maid, but as Ella's official nanny. The job comes with a proper salary, 3 times what you were making before. Your own room, full benefits, and most importantly, respect. Dorcas looked up in shock. Sir, I don't have any formal training. You have something better than training. You have love for my daughter. You were willing to sleep on a cold floor to comfort her. You were willing to spend your last money to get her medical care. You noticed when she was sick and fought to get her help. That's worth more than any certificate. Tears started flowing down Dorcas's face. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. There's more, Desmond continued. Miriam calculated what you should have been paid for the work you've actually been doing. You'll receive that back pay, plus a signing bonus. And I want you to call your mother's doctor tomorrow. Whatever she needs for her diabetes, whatever treatments, whatever medication. We'll take care of it all. Dorcas couldn't believe what she was hearing. After months of being treated like she was worthless, this man was offering her dignity, respect, and hope. Sir, I don't know what to say. Say you'll stay. Say you'll help me raise my daughter properly. Yes, sir. Of course, yes. That night, Dorcas slept in a real bed for the first time in months. Her new suite had a comfortable queen bed, a sitting area, her own bathroom, and even a small kitchenette. But more important than the physical comfort was the emotional relief. She was safe. Ella was safe. They were both valued and protected now. As she drifted off to sleep, she could hear Ella breathing peacefully through the baby monitor. But for the first time, she wasn't sleeping on the floor to provide that comfort. She was sleeping in her own bed, knowing that her love and care for Ella was appreciated and respected. The next morning brought even more changes. Desmond had hired a pediatric nurse to help with Ella's medical care and recovery, but she worked with Dorcas, not instead of her. He had also enrolled Dorcas in online courses toward a degree in early childhood education, something she had dreamed of but never thought possible. "Education is important," he told her over breakfast, the first meal they had shared as equals. "But what you already know about caring for children comes from the heart. The degree will just give you the credentials to match your natural talent." Over the next few weeks, life in the Lancaster mansion changed completely. Dorcas moved into her beautiful suite and established a routine that prioritized Ella's health, development, and happiness. She had proper uniforms, a fair wage, and most importantly, she was treated like a valued member of the household. Ella was thriving under Dorcas's dedicated care. The baby girl who used to cry for hours was now happy and healthy. She would light up whenever she saw Dorcas, reaching out her tiny hands to be held. Her recovery from the ear infection was swift and complete, and she was hitting all her developmental milestones. Desmond found himself spending more time at home, partly to bond with his daughter, but also because he enjoyed watching Dorcas work. There was something peaceful about seeing her gentleness with Ella, her quiet songs in patois, and the way she seemed to understand exactly what the baby needed. Watch out for the continuation soonest. Dear friends, thank you so much for watching. Please support me by subscribing to my channel. And don't forget to like and share this video. It means the world to me. Take care of yourself and never forget how much you're loved. I can't wait to see you in the next video. Sending you all my love.